All she wanted was to find her family and be loved. Yet, even as she begged on her knees, shouting that she was the real Shulina, the child from 18 years ago, her father looked at her with cold eyes and demanded proof. She stared back, her heart breaking, certain that her father would know it was her, but in a calm, almost cruel tone. He told her that her spirit power was too weak. She couldn't possibly be his child. As a result, Shulina was sentenced to the spirit mirror. This was all caused by Azella, the green-eyed devil who had stolen her spirit, her life, and her very existence. The real princess, Shulina, was declared wicked by everyone, abandoned in an orphanage through the Empress's scheme, and had all her spirit power stolen by the fake princess, Azella. In the original story, the real Shulina met a miserable end. This is the end of Princess Shulina of Zola, she thought. In this life, she had taken over Shulina's body, a girl destined for tragedy. The orphanage was a nightmare, the director was terrible, and she found herself treated violently even as a child. Maybe as a result of this she was unable to recall some of her original memories. The director, the head of the orphanage, had told her that she would starve that night, slapping her so hard she felt the sting long after. Curled up in pain, she feared for her future. When Shulina finally met her family again, her father told her that she was not his child. She couldn't believe it. This could not be her future. She couldn't live like that. Suddenly, someone interrupted her thoughts. A girl, the director's daughter, barked at her to prepare a meal once she was done cleaning. The girl's name was Tellen, the orphanage head's only child, and her constant tormentor. Shulina hurried to do as she was told, but Tellen tripped her. Yet, with a strange smirk, she caught Shulina mid-fall. Shulina found it odd. Why would she help her? Tellen shrugged, dismissing it as an accident, but Shulina was suspicious. Almost immediately, Tellen dragged her away, warning her not to procrastinate and get to the dining room. As Tellen walked away, Shulina noticed something was off. Tellen had slipped something into her pocket. When Shulina checked, she found the orphanage head's ring. Only the head of the orphanage possessed a ring like this. If she were falsely accused of stealing it, she would be beaten until she was unable to breathe. Panic surged through her as Tellen approached, holding a chair menacingly. Shulina's eyes filled with terror, unable to move. But Tellen suddenly collapsed, her face crashing into the soup. Shulina stood frozen in shock, her mind racing. What should she do? Rushing to Tellen's side, Shulina asked if she was hurt, but Tellen didn't respond. At that moment, the head of the orphanage stormed in, demanding to know what had happened. Tellen, barely conscious, pointed at Shulina, accusing her of stomping on her. Shulina's tears spilled over. I was the first one to worry about her. How could she accuse me of this? Her voice cracked with disbelief, but the director wasn't moved. Tellen's false accusation had already started a fire that couldn't be put out. Tellen insisted that they search Shulina's pockets, claiming she saw a sparkle. Sure enough, the ring glittered in Shulina's pocket. Tellen's accusation enraged the director. How dare she steal her ring? Tellen's glee was palpable. But Shulina quickly opened her garments, revealing nothing hidden. It was impossible, Tellen thought, swearing she had seen it. Someone in the crowd murmured that Shulina hadn't even been to the director's office that day. Shulina had only been cleaning the first floor after all. Suddenly, the director grabbed Tellen, shaking her with force. The ring fell from Tellen's own hand. Tellen stammered, mumbling that she had planted the ring on Shulina when she fell. But it was too late. Desperation filled her voice as she screamed that it was all Shulina's fault. The director, however, was done. She slapped Tellen hard and scolded her for stealing. Tellen, shaking, tried to explain herself, but the director only grew more furious. Shulina intervened, suggesting that Tellen might have had her reasons, but the director pushed her aside. She ordered Tellen to follow her, dragging the girl along as the other children watched in horrified silence. Tellen screamed, insisting she wasn't wrong, but her cries went unheard. Shulina, however, noticed something odd about Tellen. Her dress was more elaborate than usual, and she had been cleaning a room earlier that day. Something was beginning to make sense. Duke Valet was coming to the orphanage, a family known for their cursed bloodline. This was her chance. If she could secure his protection, she wouldn't have to suffer like Shulina had in the original story. Later, as she swept near the entrance, Shulina felt fortunate to have this opportunity. If she could meet the Duke, she would have a chance at survival. She waited by the gate, hoping for the moment. Suddenly, the other children gasped, pointing out a glittering carriage, larger than their orphanage. Shulina practiced her best smile, preparing for the moment she would meet her savior. Opening the door with her cutest expression, she greeted them. Standing before her was Duke Billet, with his black hair and purple eyes. It was him, and beside him was a boy, his son. She smiled at the boy, calling him handsome. The boy, slightly taken aback, introduced himself as Windy. Windy, short for Windecht, was destined to become the villain in the original story after failing to win Azella's affection. Based on the story, he should be 11 years old. Though he looked closer to 15, the boy entered the orphanage, and Windy marveled at how she wasn't afraid of him. Most people would be terrified of his cursed bloodline. She wondered if her soul power had something to do with it. Soul power was a gift used to protect the royal family from curses like those of the Duke. The Duke inquired about her age. In the sweetest voice she could muster, she informed him she was almost 7 years old. They remarked that she seemed smaller than her age. She asked for his name, saying she would need to report it to the director. With a slight chuckle, the Duke told her to just say Valet. They would understand. She grinned, taking his hand and offering to guide him to the director. After a brief conversation with the director, the Duke declared that he was looking for a child to stay with him for a month. The director suggested another child, one she deemed perfect, but the Duke shook his head. He wanted Shulina. The director was shocked, crumpling the papers in her hands. Her? She questioned, but the Duke remained firm. Shulina, thrilled, happily accepted. Moments later, she nervously asked what she would be required to do if she went with them. Laundry? Cleaning? The Duke smiled, explaining that she would be treated with honor, eat delicious food, and live comfortably in their home. Windy chimed in, commenting that if she worked, she would collapse. She didn't seem well-fed, and her skin looked rough from too much labor. Shulina proudly admitted she had been working hard, but insisted she was still strong. The Duke joked that they should feed her well to help her grow strong arms. Suddenly, the carriage shook, and Shulina almost fell, but her new father caught her just in time, asking if she was hurt. She blushed, grateful, thinking he wouldn't want to touch her because of her dirty clothes. She then noticed Windy watching her with curiosity, his strange eyes flickering with interest. He explained that he wasn't weak like her. He was training to become a knight. In the novel, he would become the greatest knight on the continent. She clapped her hands and called him cool, making him blush. He nervously muttered that it wasn't a big deal. Suddenly, the coachman apologized, explaining that the other carriages were speeding, and he had to avoid them. She knows that the nobleman should have recognized their carriage, so how could he not apologize when he almost collided with them? What does that person think he's doing? However, upon looking at the person in the other carriage, she realizes she cannot see his face clearly, but he's crying. The coachman asks if they should chase after him. He was about to give the order to do so, but Shulina interrupts, telling him she's hungry and her stomach is growling, perhaps feeling pity for the man who almost caused the accident. Fortunately, they arrive at their destination. This is where she'll be staying for the next month. All the maids welcome her to the White Rose Mansion. She offers her greetings, but upon entering, she is startled by a loud sound and instinctively curls into a ball, covering her face. Seeing this, the Duke comforts her. She nervously asks what that sound was, and he reveals it was a camera. Immediately, the cameraman kneels, prostrating himself in apology for scaring her. She wonders what this is. It isn't the typical fear of a commoner toward a noble. It seems as though they are suffering from instinctive fear, which must be the Duke's curse. The young lady, regaining her composure, tells the cameraman that she was only surprised and wishes to have a pretty picture taken. The picture is snapped, and the man leaves. Edgar, the butler of the White Rose Mansion, introduces himself. She politely introduces herself in return, expressing that she looks forward to working with him. He tells her that if she experiences any discomfort, no matter how minor, she should inform him immediately. She thanks him, thinking he doesn't seem like someone who looks down on her. Suddenly, a maid named Lucida arrives. She will help with many things, so Shulina should get to know her. Lucida brings a blanket and asks if they brought her here in this chilly weather. She wraps the blanket around Shulina, who comments that she only has this one outfit. The maid explains that the blanket was prepared for the weather, though it could have been thicker. Lucidia then asks if Shulina is hungry, to which she responds a little. Luckily, Lucida has a meal prepared for her right away. After they eat, Lucida says there will be a bath, and she inquires about Shulina's food preferences. However, Shulina doesn't know much about different foods and worries they might laugh at her. The Duke orders Lucida to prepare the best dishes for her. Lucida tells her she'll prepare a feast of the most delicious foods. This is a month-long kindness, so she shouldn't get used to this kind of treatment, but her heart is already softening. Suddenly, a young boy enters, wondering if Shulina is the child they were expecting. The boy is Dylan, the second son. Shulina stands and introduces herself, saying she is very glad to meet them and thanks them for the invitation. The Duke lifts her onto his lap, commenting that the floor is cold. He tells her she should have a good time for the next month. Dylan introduces himself and Shulina claps, commenting that his name is really pretty. He gets shy and mumbles that it's not as pretty, as she thinks. Shulina wonders why everyone in this household is treating her so kindly. It's like they've let down their guard entirely. Given that no one has approached the Duke's family so casually due to their curse, it makes sense. It's a pity that such nice people have to suffer like this. Dylan then asks if she has a nickname and she says she doesn't. The Duke suggests calling her Shoo Shoo. The name sounds really cute, and Shulina ponders if the Duke finds her cute. He tells her that he's calling her that because she resembles a cream puff. He explains that if she gains weight, she'll look like soft bread, so they will go with that name. It's a bit embarrassing to have bread as a nickname, but he comments that her cheeks resemble the bread too. Her brother picks her up from their father, and Shulina wonders why everyone in the house is so eager to please her. Dylan questions why his brother is carrying her around like a sack. Windy tells her to look at her legs and comments that she might get hurt while walking. He declares that if he's not around, he will carry her. Windy explains that he is still too weak, so he can't allow him to carry her. He'll only permit it if he can do 1,000 consecutive diagonal cuts with his sword. Shulina is amazed and wonders how he could even manage such a feat. But since Windy is destined to become a great knight in the future, maybe it's possible. Dylan exclaims that he'll work hard to make that possible. At the dinner table, Lucida comments that the three of them look like a close brother and sister. Shulina lowers her head, thinking how nice it would be if that were true. A family that would protect her, having a father, brothers, and a prosperous life, would allow her to live comfortably, without the threats and dangers that came with being a princess. It would have been better if Windert were truly her family. But it's okay. She's grateful to have met them like this. Lucida places the meal in front of her, revealing an array of dishes prepared for her to enjoy. This is her first time seeing so much food, and she worries she can't eat it all. She picks up a cream puff and stares at it for a moment, wondering if it will taste as good as it looks. When she takes a bite, the taste overwhelms her. It's unlike anything she's ever had before. She cries, telling them that the food is really good, and thanks everyone. From now on, she vows to only eat delicious food and do everything that Shulina could not. Suddenly, she begins coughing, which worries her new brothers who rush to her aid. The maid tends to her, asking what's wrong, but Shulina feels like she's about to throw up. Lucida quickly gets a bucket and tells her not to hold back. Shulina faints, and later finds herself in a field with wilted tree and grass. She's been here before. This is the spirit realm, sealed within the spirit mirror. Her head feels like it's going to explode, and suddenly, she wakes up in bed. She questions if she is okay. Meanwhile, her new father and brother stand over her, visibly worried. Doug is full of concern. She realizes now that she doesn't have to endure her sorrow alone. When she's awake, everything feels new, and she doesn't know what kind of expression to make. A man introduces himself as Baden, the chief physician of the Grand Duke's family. He inquires if there are any other places on her body that hurt, but she begins coughing as she attempts to speak. He then asks what she ate at the orphanage and if she's ever eaten anything like that before. She reveals that she has only eaten cabbage soup. He explains that the issue stems from consuming excessive nutrients too suddenly, along with the cream, which isn't good for her stomach. For now, she can only eat the medication and light food he prescribed. She thinks it's like torture, being unable to eat delicious things, and mutters to herself that the orphanage should be shut down. Her father inquires if there's anywhere else that hurts. She was unconscious for almost 2 days and just woke up. Shulina family has been avoiding eye contact since earlier, and there's a horrible smell in the room. Having been unconscious for 2 days, and with vomiting, she realizes she hasn't been able to clean herself. The bed is going to get dirty, so she tries to get off quickly, but her brother tells her not to move so suddenly, suggesting she get up slowly and take a bath. As a result, they call for Lucida, who is ordered to take her and help her bathe. Meanwhile, Shulina wonders why they look so serious, as their expressions are dark. She wonders what she can do to be loved at a time like this. Later, Lucida prepares her hair and inquires if she's feeling a bit better. Shulina lowers her head, admitting her head hurts a little, but she decides not to inform her because she doesn't want to worry her. Lucida recalls that the Duke said her opinions were important in everything and that she's a good girl who observes her surroundings and endures her suffering. Shulina thought he was angry earlier because of his dark eyes, but it was because he noticed that she was nervous. She starts to feel queasy, and Lucida asks if she's afraid of His Highness or the young master. Shulina comments that she is, and Lucida explains that it's a sensitive matter, but they have a truly remarkable presence. Because of this, everyone is afraid of the master and young master. The young master is always concerned that he might have hurt her because he stayed close to her. Lucida adds that the curse, passed down through generations, causes others to avoid them, which is why people have similar opinions about them. Shulina wonders how much suffering the curse has caused, but she's grateful to everyone. She wants to run over and clear up any misunderstandings right away. Even now, she's worried that the Grand Duke might think of her as an insolent child. She tells Shulina that now she needs to change into new clothes. She guides her to the dressing room, where Shulina is astonished to see so many beautiful clothes of all colors and sizes. Lucida explains that His Highness prepared the clothes for her, and the best part is that she can choose whichever she likes. Shulina points to a dress, saying she wants to wear that one, and Lucida quickly helps her change. She explains that they didn't have enough time, so only ready-made clothes are available for now. Soon, a tailor will be called to make custom outfits for her. Shulina realizes that the Grand Duke is going to great lengths for her. Ever since they met, he has been nothing but kind, always asking for her opinion and paying attention to the smallest details about her. She doesn't want to hurt him because of a misunderstanding. As a result, she runs off, startling the maid in her bunny slippers. She opens the door with teary eyes, wanting them to listen carefully. She looks at them, seemingly about to cry, then lowers her head and confesses that she hates how Windy has been avoiding her. He kept avoiding her eyes earlier, and it hurt her feelings. She reveals that she likes His Grace, her brother Windy, and her other brother too. She even likes Lucida and everyone in the house. Coming from the orphanage, this place feels like paradise. In the orphanage, everyone hated her because she was a dirty orphan. No one cared or treated her nicely. She was a child who was unworthy of love, seen as useless. But for the first time, she's met people who care for her. They hug her without hesitation, hold her hand, and make her happy. Now, she thinks she understands why she felt so uneasy with them. They were like her. Just like how she was alone in the world, the Grand Duke's family was isolated because of the curse. Suddenly, the Grand Duke hugs her passionately. She cries in his arms, pleading with him not to avoid her anymore. She doesn't want to be hated, They wipe away her tears and assure her she's not a dirty orphan. She is their sister. The Duke tells her that she must be exhausted after waking up and crying so much, so she should go inside, and he'll feed her some soup. She wipes her tears and agrees. Later, she shows off her cute dress to the Duke, and after a moment of observation, he comments that it's cute, making her really happy. She wonders if the Duke finds her adorable. He remarks that she's as cute as Dragonfly, which startles her, as she doesn't find Dragonfly cute. She reveals that she has never worn anything with these things before. The Duke is suddenly shocked to see her thin legs, which look like they could break at any moment. He quickly suggests they eat before the food gets cold. He asks her to sit and begins feeding her, but she screams in pain because the soup is too hot. She tells him it's hot, and he asks if she's okay, which makes her cry. Lucida arrives and asks what's wrong. Shulina explains that the Duke gave her soup without cooling it first, and it was really hot. Lucida gives her some water, complimenting her for not crying too much, saying she's a good girl. She gently suggests the Duke blow on the soup next time before giving it to her. The Duke concludes that her body must be weak, so her tongue might be delicate too. Lucida agrees, adding that eating hot food without cooling it down would hurt anyone. However, Windy and Deli never had this issue, but comparing the physical abilities of the Duke's family with regular people isn't fair. Shulina reassures him that he didn't mean to hurt her and asks why he suddenly gave her the soup. He explains that she's too thin and needs to eat well to grow taller. He promises that if she eats well and takes her medicine, he'll give her something special that he's never given to other children. They make a pinky promise. In the next scene, Shulina's father reflects on how nice it would be if he could stay inside. He had searched for the child for 6 years, despite being told the child was cremated within 3 days, according to custom. The Empress, who had given birth, also died shortly after, unable to endure the labor due to her frail health. Empress Elena, his other wife, had relayed all of this to him. Everyone found it odd that he was still searching for a child presumed dead, but he firmly believed she was alive. He had felt the awakening of her spiritual power after she was born. Even though he knew it seemed irrational, hope pushed him to travel to every orphanage in the country. Even his son believed in his quest. He would draw up plans for what he would do with his sister when she finally came home. Lucas, the only one in the imperial palace who shared this belief, eagerly awaited the sibling left behind by his late mother. He imagined teaching her swordsmanship and carrying her every day. His hope grew each day, but the time passed, and his bright, hopeful face slowly dimmed. In contrast, the Emperor had another daughter. She had cream-colored skin, with ears and green eyes resembling emeralds. She would always bring him flowers and say she loved him. Born to his second wife, who had married him for political reasons, Azella was a child he never wanted. Despite this, she remained in his life, though his heart could not love her the way he longed for his lost daughter. Everyone advised him to forget the youngest child and focus on raising the ones he had. But he couldn't forget his last child. He wished he could see her, just once. His search seemed endless, yet he refused to give up. Where did my daughter go, without ever being held in my arms? He thought. Meanwhile, Shulina was happily playing with her brothers, who kept calling her back and forth like a puppy. Deli asked if she was tired from exercising and offered her a sweet meringue. She declared, "Big brother, you're the best." Suddenly, she noticed that Windy was recording her activities again. She knew he was working on a health program and consulting with doctors, so seeing her fragile state must have shocked him. Windy called Shulina over to his side. Yet again. She sighed, knowing she couldn't refuse, and quickly went over. Deli then proclaimed that he would teach her swordsmanship and called her over too. Frustrated at being pulled in 2 directions, she grew upset. Deli, in a burst of enthusiasm, suddenly swung his sword. But before it could land, Windy blocked it, shielding Shulina with his chest. Swinging a sword without understanding the situation? Are you crazy? Windy scolded. With apologetic eyes, Deli lowered his sword and asked if Shulina was hurt. She smiled, calling him cute, but he reminded her of the seriousness of the situation. She just giggled and told him again that he was adorable. Flustered, Deli urged her to stop teasing him. Just then, a servant entered, reporting the findings of an investigation into the orphanage where Shulina had stayed. The children had been severely malnourished, with none receiving adequate nutrition. Most of the orphanage had fallen into disrepair, except for the director's office. The servant added that if funds from the Duke's estate had been used properly, things wouldn't have been this dire, even without personal donations. Hearing this, the Duke was infuriated. His normally calm demeanor was overshadowed by the anger he felt. The servant concluded that Shulina, the girl they had adopted, might soon become a proper young lady of the house. The Duke then summoned Shulina. When she entered the room, she was confused, as they usually only met during mealtimes or tea. "Why is he calling me now?" she wondered. The Duke gestured for her to sit and asked her what she thought of the orphanage. Surprised, she hesitated, noticing his cold expression and the dark aura around him. It was a face she had never seen before. Is he dissatisfied with me? Is he going to send me back to the orphanage? Her thoughts raced. It had only been 2 weeks since she had arrived. What did she do wrong? How should she handle this? Should she try to appeal to his emotions, or show him her intelligence and obedience? With tears brimming in her eyes, she asked, "Are you planning to send me back to the orphanage because you don't need me?" The Duke's stern expression softened. "What? No. Who told you that you weren't needed?" he asked, surprised. Shulina explained. "He suddenly asked about the orphanage. I thought you didn't want me here anymore." The Duke quickly apologized for his haste and handed her a small gift. It was a promise gift, a cream puff. As she touched it, she noticed it was cold. "This is an ice cream puff," the Duke explained. "It's frozen and meant to be eaten cold. The Duchess, Dylan's mother, used to love it." Touched, Shulina marveled at its delicious taste. "Thank you for such a wonderful treat," she exclaimed. The Duke smiled and told her, "If you like it that much, come by often, and I'll have more prepared for you." Relieved, Shulina realized she wasn't being sent back to the orphanage after all. The Duke explained that he had been asking about the orphanage because of a report on the director's mistreatment of the children. Overjoyed at this opportunity to expose the director, Shulina began to recount everything in her sweetest voice. "The director works hard so everyone can eat, but donations are rare. We help her a lot by doing the laundry and cleaning. We work about 10 hours a day, sewing and cleaning after breakfast until dinner," she explained. The Duke, clearly furious, asked, "Children like you work for 10 hours? I only work 8. How are you still alive?" He then inquired if she had ever been beaten. Shulina replied, "Of course. I was just a useless child at the orphanage, so I learned to clean and do laundry well, hoping to work as a maid in a good household someday." The Duke's anger boiled over, and he smashed the arm of his chair. Worried, Shulina held his hand and gently pleaded, "Please don't hurt yourself. It'll hurt me too." Moved by her words, the Duke held her hand and reassured her, "I feel the same way. He hopes a child with such beautiful hands will no longer suffer." At that moment, her nose began to sting with tears. She tried her best not to cry but believed that these feelings must be written in the original host emotions. From what he had heard, the director was a terrible human being, but the orphanage was a necessary place for the Duke's estate. He promised he would punish and expose the director, then bring in a new one. She was happy that now the children of the orphanage could be free from the director. It had only been a few days since she thought that, but why did it turn out like this? Why was she before a monster too hideous to describe? It was her first time outside the mansion, and she had been very excited to visit Central Park, happy that her brother was bringing her. It would have been nice if Wendy could have gone as well, but he was busy, so it couldn't be helped. They were going to get her a drink when suddenly she noticed a young girl drinking something. Her brother said he liked that drink too, so he was going to buy it for her. He quickly left to buy it, though they told him to wait for a moment. Unfortunately, it couldn't be helped. Suddenly, a blue magic circle appeared on our protagonist's face, and when Lucy turned around, she was gone. That's how she ended up back in front of the monster. Suddenly, she noticed that the man in the hood was a member of the Empress's secret organization. In the novel, the Empress commanded a secret organization from the White Mage Tower, and this person was definitely one of them. Since the director could not use magic, nor did she have the ability to gather information from the Duke's house, it was clear that the Empress was determined to abduct her. But why on earth would they do that? The director commented that she had been doing well, and the girl confirmed that she had, but wondered where this was. There were still 2 weeks left. Was it the Duke and the sponsorship practice? She would naturally leave the Duke's house soon, so why go through the trouble of abducting her now? The director commented that even if she was useless, there seemed to be a place where she was needed. The man approached her, commenting that it had been a while, and she realized they were trying to drain her power again. They had taken it away a month ago, and she didn't want it to happen again. She didn't want to feel that pain again. With a weak, trembling voice, she begged for someone to help her. She even looked to the director for aid, but they were the ones who had tolerated the draining of her spiritual power when she was at the orphanage. There was no way they would help her now, so she tried to stay calm. It was still okay, she could change the future. It wasn't yet time for the Empress to imprison her. The hooded figure advanced. In the original novel, and even since coming to this world, she had constantly seen the magical tool, the secret of Azalea. Azalea described how royal blood had no spiritual power, so she always carried the brooch that contained her spiritual power so she could use it. But it never said that Shulina, who was supposed to have sealed spiritual power, had it stolen. She didn't steal Azalea's power, they had different mothers. Who was born first without spiritual power? Why was it her fault? Why did she read a nonsensical novel that treated someone who wasn't the protagonist as a villain? That brooch the man held in his hand should never touch her. She began to fight back, and the man tried to hold her down, telling her to stay still. Suddenly, she knocked a purple liquid from his pocket. He inquired, "Why are you resisting?" Suddenly, she shouted for the Duke to save her. He exclaimed, "Get your hand off her right now." He was surrounded, and the young lady cried tears of joy. They had really come for her. The magician was very irritated and created a barrier so they could not approach. Unfortunately, she also couldn't escape. They were trying to take her as a hostage, but the magician was distracted by the Duke. She needed to find a way to escape, or better yet, fight back. She grabbed a piece of broken glass and stabbed him with it. He screamed, and fortunately for her, the barrier was released. Upon seeing the brooch fall, she knew what she needed to do. She had to move immediately and get rid of that thing. If she destroyed it, they wouldn't be able to come after her while it was being remade. However, when the Windy quickly grabbed her, telling her it was okay and that he was there for her, she told him they needed to get rid of the orb. The hooded man quickly reached for it, but the Dylan knocked it away with his sword, commenting that his diagonal cutting practice had paid off. She thought to herself, "My big brother is dangerous." Suddenly, a spell was cast, and the hooded man attempted to escape with the brooch. He caught it in his hand, smirking victoriously, but he was pierced by the Duke's sword, and the brooch was destroyed in the process. The hooded man lost his life, and the Duke commented that he had failed to control his strength. Dylan wanted to ask why the man had done it, but his father assured him it was okay. There was still someone else who could be held responsible. The Duke turned his attention to the terrified director, who was prostrate in a fetal position as the Duke approached her. He declared that his control over his strength hadn't been working well lately and that he was very angry. She apologized and declared that she had committed a capital offense. The Duke declared that if she had committed a capital offense, she should die, but he had many questions first. No matter how much she degraded herself, she would still answer. The director exclaimed, "How dare someone like that disrespect you? It's impossible." She explained that she did what she did because someone just like him had ordered her to. Otherwise, she wouldn't have harmed the child she had protected. Shulina reflected on the fact that the director, who had tormented her so much, was so weak in front of the Duke. If Shulina had been a bit stronger or had found her true identity sooner, would the director have bowed to her too? She hugged her brother desperately, and he declared that no one would ever harm her again. It was okay now, everyone was going to protect her. The Duke inquired who was with the director, but she told him she couldn't say. If she told him, she would lose her life. Normally, she would have betrayed and revealed everything long ago. So why was the director staying silent now, with some misplaced sense of loyalty? The Duke told her she was foolish. "Do you really think you will live after doing such a thing?" The Duke said coldly. He removed his sword from its sheath, commenting that no matter how insignificant something may seem, the potential for trouble must be eliminated. But Windy commented that Shulina was watching and her feelings were fragile. Seeing this might make her faint. So, the Duke ordered them to take Shulina home, telling them to give her warm milk and let her rest. Suddenly, the director called for Shulina, desperation evident in her voice. She begged her to help her. She may have done wrong, but Shulina must love her, doesn't she? Instead of answering, Shulina asked if things would really change with the Duke in charge. He told her, yes. She commented that no one would beat them anymore. The food would be delicious, and there would be no more moldy walls. Hearing this, the former director clenched her fists. They wouldn't be scolded for not working all day, and the Duke affirmed all of this. The director smiled, hope filling her eyes as tears ran down her face. Shulina called her name, and the director smiled again. But Shulina questioned, "Have you ever listened to my pleas for help before?" She asked for help earlier, but the director hadn't listened. She then leave with her brother. The time for forgiveness had passed. The director couldn't harm her anymore. With the brooch destroyed, the Empress wouldn't have the resources to worry about her for a while. It was a temporary connection severed. So farewell, director. Upon reaching home, she noticed her brother was sad and questioned if he was okay. He lowered his head and asked if she was hurt. She quickly told him she wasn't. He began crying, saying that he wasn't worthy of being her big brother. He couldn't protect her, all because of a simple drink. She told him that the evil magician had taken her away and intended to do bad things to her. But she knew that he and the Duke would come to rescue her. She trusted them nonetheless. It was a dangerous thought for someone who couldn't trust anyone, but at that moment, it felt like everyone would come to save her. This time, she had barely escaped thanks to these people. But the Empress would come back to take her spiritual power again. Today had been manageable because of the Duke, but what about next time? The Violet family was with her, but what should she do? The Duke's family was the top family in the empire, but the Empress was royalty. Moreover, the Empress's family, the Bertildes, was a noble head and controlled the southern part of the empire, which handled the empire's food supply. The Duke's family had been uninvolved in politics, so their power was weak.